Oh, this like well, at least this okay. This transition actually makes sense. Speaking of murder, let's get into our movie of the week, which is another Hitchcock film called Dial M for Murder. It's about this man who sets up a murder of his unfaithful wife.
Yep.
And he thinks he has set it up perfectly, but things don't go exactly according to plan, and so he has to basically change things up on the fly. And he is somewhat successful in that he then frames the murder of the assailant that he hired on his wife, and it's through some really careful investigation and deduction that the police start to suspect that it was actually the husband. And at the end of the movie, they set a trap for him, and he falls for the trap, and the wife is cleared of all charges, and she's free to go live happily ever after with her lover.
Yeah, that's it was definitely an interesting film.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my take on it is I felt like the acting was fantastic. You had was it Ray Milland was the male lead as Tony Wendis.
Yeah.
Grace Kelly was his wife.
So
Margot Wendis. Grace Kelly. Oof. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What a knockout. You had Robert Cummings play Mark Halliday, and
the lover.
The guy who I felt like stole the show was the Inspector Hubbard, John Williams. And
yeah. I liked him.
Yeah, I liked him too. I really liked him too. And the crazy thing is he's done a lot, but as far as film goes, this is probably his best known film.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's done a lot of theater and television acting, but this is one of his more better known films that he did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say this, that the film is definitely, you have to look at it as something that was from a 1950s perspective, where the plot was a little bit obviously we're kind of given the premise and the plot pretty early on, but in today's standards we probably it could be pretty much debunked pretty easily as far as evidence fabrication, all that stuff,
right? Because what is it? It everything kind of flowed in really quickly, like the introduction of Grace Kelly's character and is it James Cummings' character?
Robert Cummings.
Robert Cummings' character, and just their whole affair. It was really quickly done, and then all of a sudden we're introduced to the husband, and then all of a sudden we're introduced to the killer that he hires, and it's it all just happened really quickly. The pacing was very fast, and you didn't there wasn't any time to kind of settle and ease into it. It just happened very quickly. It isn't in modern movie making or storytelling where you kind of do this very subtle a setup. Where you have the husband and wife together, and then and then the wife and the lover have these they steal glances from each other while the wife is with the husband, and this and then this tension is built up because because the audience knows something that the husband doesn't know.
Yeah, this movie is definitely all the dialogue is definitely the most important part of this film, because that's what drives the narrative of the story. And so, like I said, I don't know if this would be necessarily something that would work today. We talked about how several months ago we did another Hitchcock film called Shadow of a Doubt that we both went into kind of blind. And so, in a similar way, it's definitely not something that would work today. But for its time, I think it definitely had an interesting storyline, interesting impact, and it was also very narrative driven. Yeah, you had to pay attention to what people are saying and how they're saying it, and that's where it's like when you have good actors like this movie did, it works. This could have been one of those movies that it's. I know the American Film Institute rates this movie rather highly, but this also could have been a film that could have been a Razzie. It could have been a terrible film if you didn't have the right people in place.
True. I mean, if this was like straight, if this is straight adapted from like 1950s to now, then yeah, it would have been like, it's like who the heck? Like, why are these people talking like this? Why is that? Why are their performances so like cheesy or whatever? It just wouldn't work.
Well, I'm saying even in the 50s itself, like if you had the wrong actors, this could have been a terrible film. Because the dialogue was what drove the narrative of the story. That drove it was all narrative from the dialogue of all the characters. And if they don't work together very well, then your movie flops. I like pretty much all the characters. It's definitely despite an intermission.
There was an intermission.
It is a rather quick film at 135-40 minutes. So not.
I think it was an hour and 45, almost 2 hours.
Yeah, which it was a very fast pace.
But yeah, it went by very quickly, for sure. Yeah, I think it was pretty interesting. Like, it was interesting that he thought that he crafted like this perfect plan to murder his wife. But then at the dinner, like the lover, he was saying like, oh, people think it's so easy because the lover is a writer, and I think I believe like he wrote like crime thrillers or detective stories. And so he was like saying like, oh, criminals always think that they come up with like the perfect plan or created found a foolproof way to get away with anything, but they always forget about all the things that can go wrong and blah 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 blah. And it was like at that point where like the main character Tony, he starts to get like worried. And things things actually do start going wrong.
Right from the get-go, everything was starting to go wrong. Like, he expected Margot to stay home and listen to the radio theater, which he had to like. She was actually going to go out, and he had to convince her not to go out. Then his watch stopped, so he missed the timetable to. For part of his plan with his accomplice.
Right.
So there was that problem. And then the fact that, part of the reason that she ended up staying home is that Margot stayed home was she was Tony Wendis. He was a former tennis star, and she was helping him work on a scrapbook of his from his old glory days. And so she had scissors and all that other stuff out, and because of that, she was able to kill the guy that Tony had hired to murder his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that issue, and so he had to kind of think on the fly and try to trick his wife, and it just too many things fell apart. But at the time, it seemed like it all worked out, but in reality, they were the things that did him in the end. In the end.
Right. Exactly. Now I'm kind of curious to see the newer version of this movie called Perfect Murder, starring Michael Douglas and Gwyneth Paltrow. That was made in like the late 90s.
Yeah, 98. I would like to see how they adapted it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to see what they did differently, because there would have to be a lot different with how they handled that movie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be the same like setup and resolution as in like the 50s version. They'd have to like modernize it, and I think they did. Like instead of the husband hiring like an old like friend or whatever, or like because like in Hitchcock's, Tony hires an old college friend who was like kind of hit the skids a little bit. And
C.A. Swan.
Yeah,
was his character.
He already had like a reputation, and so he also hasn't been living like the best life, and so he's able to like deduce that he would do this for the money that he was offering. But in I think the late 90s version, the husband recruits the lover actually.
That'd be interesting to see.
Right.
Maybe we'll have to talk about A Perfect Murder later on.
Right, yeah. And then we could do like a compare contrast kind of thing.
Yeah. So how would you rate the movie overall, Andy?
I really like this movie. If I were to on a 5 scale, I give it a 3.5.
You give it a 3.5?
A 3.5.
I don't rate it quite as highly. I would say about 2.5 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I would lean more towards 3, mainly because I would say the acting was so good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's I don't know if I like this over. This is definitely not my favorite Hitchcock film. And it's not a bad movie. It's just I don't know. I guess I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it left a little bit to be desired. I loved all the actors in it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the reason why I'm rating it, closer to like a 3. But yeah, for me, it's definitely 2.5 to 3. I don't know. I would not rate this as high as it was on the AFI list.
Right. Okay. And I guess that's the whole point. Everyone has like their own, everyone has their own tastes.
Yeah.
Not everyone. It's funny. It reminds me of a line from Chappelle's Show when they're talking. When he does like the sketch where talking about if he was to be placed on like certain juries for certain like celebrity trials.
And
he was like saying like, oh, some people like during the interview, the prosecutor asked him something, and he's like, oh, like everyone has different tastes. Like some people say cucumbers taste better pickled, which is like kind of confused. Like what? And it's like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone has different tastes. Everyone has different like criterias for movies. I mean, I enjoyed this movie. I would recommend other people to watch it, and again,
Oh
and they
yeah,
might.
absolutely. I think it's definitely like worth at least one watch. You can kind of see for yourself. But it's I don't think it's Hitchcock's best film, and I definitely don't think it should be ranked as high as it is on the AFI list. But that's just
Wait,
me.
where is it on the AFI list?
I think. Well, let's see. I had to look. As of, let me see. I have it. I had this up here. Reception. As of 2001, it was number 48.
Okay. I might agree. I might agree with you on that. Not within the top 50.
No, and that's where I'm like, man, that's a little high.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I don't think I would place Citizen Kane. I would not put it as number one. I think Casablanca is number one.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I haven't seen Citizen Kane, or I can't. I mean, I think I have seen it, but I just can't remember like too many of the details. But yeah, I really like Casablanca. And
man, that was a damn good movie.
It was. It really was.
I personally think that's the best film ever created.
And I would not necessarily disagree with you on that.
Yeah. As of all of the classic films we've watched for this live stream for this show, and we're trying to make our way through the AFI list and all that stuff. Man, Casablanca to me right now is number one. I think it's one of the great movies of all time, and it's a movie to me that holds up to today.
Agreed.
That, and I'm also a sucker for Humphrey Bogart. I think he's one of the great actors of all time too.
Okay.
I really like. I definitely like him a lot. But yeah, that's my take on Dial M for Murder. And it's a decent film. Go watch it. And yeah, one of these days we'll watch A Perfect Murder and see how we will compare and contrast, and see if the newer adaptation works.
Word. Yeah. So there you have it, folks. Robert gives it 2.5 to 3. I give it a 3 now. So now now it's your turn. Go watch it. And leave us a comment. Maybe leave us a comment. After this is archived, and you can tell us how you what you thought of Dial M for Murder.